A huge welcome to our December monthly meeting. We're thrilled this evening to be welcoming Clare Rogers, who's joining us from London. Clare is a mum and has been campaigning for safer infrastructure for cycling for a while now. And she currently works at London Cycling Campaign as the Healthy Streets campaigner. But she's got a long history of cycle campaigning before that. So Clare, I'd like to hand over to you really. Clare's going to talk to us about campaigning and how to sort of win hearts and minds, how to move from an idea to some real progress with things. So over to you, Clare.
Brilliant, thanks, Rosamund. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. It's really lovely to talk to you guys. I'm just gutted that it's not in person because I would have loved the excuse to come to Cambridge. I've been a couple of times. I'm a big fan. But anyway, that can happen in the future, I hope. So I just wanted to start by, as Rosamund said, by telling you a little bit about myself. So I haven't always been a cycle campaigner. Until about 7 or 8 years ago, really, I was a typical resident of Enfield in that I drove everywhere, did the school run, especially after I became a mum. I was just very reliant on my car every single day. And I guess what happened was about 7 or 8 years ago, I just began to wake up to the problems of traffic domination in the UK and its effects. And there are a few sort of things that kind of struck me more or less at the same time. The first one was air pollution and the number of lives it was ending early, especially in London. Another one was the terrible figure of 5 a day. That's 5 road deaths a day in the UK. And I can't think of a more devastating way to lose a loved one than and not to be able to say goodbye and for their life to be ended just like that. It guts me, and it's all completely needless. Climate change is another big one for me, and it's transpiring that road transport in the UK is now one of the worst, if not the worst, sectors for emissions. Another one that really got to me at this period of transition for me was the loss of children's freedom, and the fact that it's really shrunk to nothing. Children's freedom to roam has just shrunk to nothing over the last 4 generations. And somehow a driver's right to a shortcut trumps a child's right to play out on their own streets. And it's just like, what is that about? Children have really been robbed. And it's by traffic, it's the fear of traffic that is the #1 reason children are not free. And finally, physical inactivity, we just know what a huge killer it is, heart disease, and so on. And just, exercise has been stripped from our streets, again, because of traffic. So all these things were kind of dawning on me around about the same time. And in 2014, the Mayor of London granted my borough of Enfield, which is very car dependent, outer London borough, as you probably know, to become a Mini Holland, which is meant to be a haven for walking and cycling, and he granted it £30 million. And so I would love to tell you that the residents of Enfield rose up as one and rejoiced at this opportunity to have cycle lanes and better town centres. And strangely, that wasn't their reaction at all. It was as if the whole borough collectively lost its mind, and these lovely yellow posters appeared up and down the windows of my local high streets. Just saying this is being imposed on us. We will no longer, the town centre is going to be destroyed because no one will be able to park. Actually, very few parking spaces were lost, so it was just hysteria really, and a lot of misinformation. So I saw this outcry, and I'd just ditched the car for the school run, and I was doing it by tandem, which was an utter joy, as you can imagine. So having inadvertently become a cyclist, I thought, I should probably help out with this. And I joined my local branch of London Cycling Campaign, Enfield Cycling Campaign, and I became a campaigner. And so that was the start of my journey. And I just wanted to share some of the things that I've learned on that journey as a campaigner. And hope to share some things I've learned about growing grassroots support for walking and cycling and better streets, and working with decision makers. And it feels a bit strange, to be honest, to be talking to people in Cambridge, because it feels like you guys have kind of sussed it already. Your city is such a leading light for cycling. I know that I'm sure there's more to be done, but it feels very strange to sit here in London and think that I have anything to tell you, but I'll share with you that journey anyway, and I hope it is of some use to you. So I guess the first lesson I want to share really is it's not a bike conversation, it's a people conversation. And what we were hearing in Enfield, and it's the same argument the world over probably, is that the argument from the bike lane opponents was, this is cyclists versus normal people. And cyclists, well, who are they? They're a tiny percentage of middle-aged men in Lycra, and it's the normal people who are being ignored here. And in Enfield, we just wanted to change that to, that's not the argument. It's a people-friendly streets versus traffic-dominated streets conversation. It's about people, because nobody benefits from traffic domination. Whether you cycle or not is irrelevant. Nobody benefits from that. And we realised that we just, as campaigners, we just need to educate the public and politicians, because many people in the UK start off like I did, being car blind. We can't see what the source of the problem is. And, that's not surprising, because as we now know, vehicle miles have just skyrocketed, especially in the last decade. And they've especially skyrocketed, increased by 70% over the last decade on minor roads, on residential streets. And we now know that's because that's around about 2009 was when sat-navs became widely available on people's phones. And suddenly it opens up, all these tiny roads became part of the road network. So the roads, as people took shortcuts down them, so the road network expanded and induced loads of traffic. But it happened incrementally enough that we didn't realise what was happening around us. So it was having massive impacts on our well-being, our lives, but we couldn't see what was causing the problem. So I always say we've been like frogs in boiling water. And as campaigners, we need to just highlight what's actually going on. It's not about cycling versus normal people. It's about subduing the traffic problem. And so what we did as campaigners, we were a tiny campaign. We were mostly men, older men than me and myself. But we teamed up with other people who supported the Mini Holland scheme. So like parents of school children, Play Street organisers, people who just wanted a nicer high street. People who were worried about the environment, and we had a Facebook group, and that became Better Streets for Enfield. So we were just making the point, this is for everyone, it's not just people who cycle. And we're very proud of kind of teaming up with sort of pedestrian activists, and to our disappointment, lots of them took up cycling. I'm like, no, that's not the point. But that's what happens when you create better streets. People do find they can cycle, and it happens like that. So as Better Streets for Enfield, what we were saying was, the status quo isn't working, and there are ways to make it better. And while we started off very much focusing on the Mini Holland scheme, and we supported the first cycle route to go in, we came up with a whole bunch of asks. So these are our 5 asks. Low traffic neighbourhoods, a joined up network for walking and cycling, pedestrian friendly high streets, 20 miles an hour, and school streets. And some of those asks are already happening, which is great. And the other thing that's great is that we've seen lots of other Better Streets groups bringing up across London, or Healthy Streets groups, which on the whole nothing to do with me. They've just appeared. Although when I started a London cycling campaign, so I'm focusing on central London, I helped to set up Westminster Healthy Streets and Better Streets for Kensington and Chelsea, and they're just allies of the LCC groups. They're not members of those groups. And both of those groups have a similar set of asks, and the strapline, for instance, in Westminster is less traffic, clean air, and safe active travel for everyone. Which is it's a really useful way of campaigning, because in areas that are hostile to cycling, as central London boroughs are, it's a really helpful way to widen out that conversation and say, look, this is for everyone. And who doesn't want less traffic, especially in Westminster? So we found that really useful. But another way to kind of widen out the conversation doesn't have to be go and form a Better Streets group. There are lots of cycling organisations that have just formed coalitions with other groups. So in Lambeth, for instance, they formed an amazing coalition with like environmental groups, clean air campaigners, pedestrians like Living Streets. And this is in the picture is Isabel Clements, who's Wheels for Wellbeing Director, and they campaign for disabled cyclists. So there's a lot of ways of showing that coalition. of supports. And I can't talk about coalitions without talking about the awesome Better Streets for Kensington and Chelsea, who, to support the Kensington High Street bike lane, they gathered more than 70 organisations, institutions, businesses to say, yes, we do want safe bike lanes on Kensington High Street. And that included Royal Albert Hall, Imperial College, Waitrose, Peter Jones, 2 NHS trusts and their hospitals, 14 schools. And these are the cycle lanes that were sadly pulled out 7 weeks after they had gone in as a trial. And the group are now conducting a judicial review against the council because they believe that decision was unlawful. But in part of the council's argument was that, oh, nobody wants this, businesses don't want it, people don't want it. And they were able to show with this incredible show of support, actually ordinary people want it, institutions want their students to be safe or their employees to be safe. So that was just a really powerful statement. We hope it will bear fruit eventually in that borough. So that's all about changing the conversation and building coalitions. And then another thing I want to share with you is just about growing that grassroots support. And I think this is all about it. You know, it's about educating people, raising awareness, and then showing them how things could be, showing them an inspiring vision, explaining what a low traffic neighbourhood is, what school streets are, what protected bike lanes can do to change a city. And it's about finding the latent street champions who are out there, people like I was 10 years ago. And you can do that by speaking at residents' associations, we did a lot of that, speaking to other local interest groups, ward forums, taking people on tours of Waltham Forest. That's the borough next door. I'm sure you know what an amazing job they've done to tame traffic and return streets to people. So we've done umpteen tours, and the campaigners there and even the council officers there give really good tours. When you go to Waltham Forest, the sun always shines, as I'm proving in this picture, always without fail. It just, I don't know how they do that. Must be something to do with the streets. What else can you do? We've done events that are just try and engage people who wouldn't normally cycle, to show them that cycling can be for them as well. And I'm sure you do a lot of this in Cambridge too. We've got a very popular in Enfield Chire bike event once a year, where we get hundreds of people just riding different bikes around the tennis courts in our local park. And there is a lot of family bikes like the ones in the pictures, and also inclusive bikes like hand cycles and recumbent trikes and so on. I'm realising, showing you these pictures, you're like, well, yeah, every second bike in Cambridge looks like this, but in Enfield, you don't see bikes like this, and you certainly don't get to try them. So this is a really good way for people to experience, you know, travelling in a different way. And it's just it's a lot of fun. It's like a fairground attraction, but they go away thinking, actually, maybe I could cycle instead of drive to school. And we also we support groups that get women riding. There's a couple of women-only bike rides that happen in Enfield. And this wonderful Turkish-speaking community centre have set up a bike hub. So they're London Avisi Klept Kulübü, which is London Cycling Club, sorry. And they have done amazing, incredible stuff to get women, especially, cycling from the Turkish community and other ethnic minorities, and children as well. I'm just in awe of what they've done. So we try and support them as much as we can. So that's part of, you know, growing the grassroots. But another important thing to say actually is meetings. And I could give another whole talk on how to have healthy meetings, which I'm sure you guys don't need to hear. But you know, some local groups can struggle, and it's all about, there are things we need to think about to make meetings inclusive, and that's been so difficult, hasn't it, when we're meeting online. But there are things you can do to make people really feel like they belong, they have a role, and just support one another. So that's all very well, but what about when you have a specific scheme and the opposition is really fierce? And I don't know what it's been like in Cambridge. In London, it's been absolutely bananas. And they're just really, really toxic opposition to the street-based schemes, as we call them, that have gone in during the pandemic. So, for instance, here, this is from Ealing, just vandalism. But worse than that, there've been death threats and other threats against councillors that are making brave decisions about streets. And I think what I find most distressing is the attacks on just individuals who support LTNs. And that's been so toxic and so damaging. And one example for me is a woman on my street, a bit older than me, lives on her own. And she put a comment on Facebook about how she supported our local low traffic neighbourhoods. And one of the more kind of extreme opponents of LTNs came around and he sort of lay in wait outside her front door. And then he filmed her getting into her car and driving away. And then he put that all over social media saying, you know, she supports LTNs, yet she has a car. We weren't quite sure what the point of that was, but it was horrible, intimidating. You could see where she lived. And it's things like that that have really just poisoned the conversation. And while opponents say that LTNs divide communities, it's not the LTN that divide communities, it's the toxic conversation that happens around it. So it's really important, we found, to make safe spaces for people who are supporting LTNs and other controversial schemes. You know, lots of WhatsApp groups that are just for people who are positive and supportive. And for instance, our Facebook group in Enfield, Best Streets for Enfield, it's just for people who agree with our 5 Rs, broadly support that. And what we say is, you know, there are lots of places where we can debate the pros and cons of LTNs and cycle lanes and school streets. But in this particular Facebook group, we are supporting one another and we're debating about how we can support these schemes, just to create that safe space. Because, you know, we've seen people just completely back off of the campaign because they're having nightmares and it's affecting their mental health, and that's not okay. So, but one thing to say about opposition, when it flares up, it can actually galvanise support. So it can be your friend in a sense. Certainly the opposition to the Enfield's Mini Holland actually was what catalysed support. People going, oh, I didn't know about this scheme until I saw the yellow posters, and now I don't want to lose it, so I'm going to campaign for it. And I've seen that all over London again and again. So it can work in your favour. But how do you respond? We just don't argue. There's no point arguing, especially on social media. And we would always say, you know, someone puts a post saying, you know, cycle lanes destroy local high streets. You know, if you want to respond with one tweet that links to your frequently asked questions page on your website, here's 90 billion reasons why cycle lanes are good for high streets, and then just back off. You know, don't get drawn in. It's just not worth it. So don't argue, just do nice things. Celebrate the good stuff, because there is so much good stuff to celebrate. We did this in my area just before it became an LTN. This is a horrible rat run that has thousands of cars a day cutting through it from outside London into the centre. But it was a Play Street day. So people in the community from all around who wanted to support the low traffic neighbourhood that was proposed gathered, and we had this banner printed, and the kids made their own banners, as you can see, and placards, and it was just really lovely. And you know, it's good to kind of wheel this photo out and show how much support there is. Something else you can do, something else we've been doing, is just kind of enjoying once the low traffic neighbourhood arrived. On the left, that's Wobbly Bikers. That was a local mum, kind of back my age. She's like, okay, let's all dust off our bikes that have been rusting in our sheds, you know, because a lot of people in this area don't cycle, and let's wobble around our low traffic streets now that we can. And lots of kids came on that, lots of women. That's my friend with his disabled daughter. He made the most of it. So yeah, again, just celebrating what's there without making a point about it, just doing it. And then on the right, that was we surprised the builders of the first bike lane as part of our Mini Holland. Sorry, my dog is so noisy. By giving them bacon butties and tea and coffee early one morning, and it got into the local paper. There's a banner in the background that says "Thank you for the bike lanes," drawn by my daughter. And it was just like, this is about children, and as mums, we've made a big thing about being mums and put our aprons on, and said, you know, we're just grateful that you're doing this for our kids. So it kind of highlights, you know, we're celebrating, we're the good guys, and then you can contrast that to vandalism and shouting on social media. So then it comes to the all-important consultation time on your specific scheme. And what we found here is it's really important. Again, it's not about arguing. You're not going to change the minds of the small percentage of people who would give their lives for it, and the small percentage of people who hate it with a passion. It's finding those people in between who haven't ventured an opinion. And with low traffic neighbourhoods, we just find, although it's time consuming, door knocking is an absolute game changer. Just go and knock on people's doors, talk to them face to face. And what you'll find is that what we found on every single street actually was that the majority of people we asked said, yes, I support the LTN, but no one else does. I'm the only one on my street. That was a majority of the street, because people don't know, they don't want to stick their necks out, and they don't want to talk to their neighbours about it because it's so toxic. They think they're on their own. So we can say, actually, you're in the majority, and please can you just tell the council that you support it, fill in the consultation. And often they say, what consultation? So merely by saying, there is a consultation, here's how you fill it in, you're actually changing the results. And it's not, you're just making it more representative. The more representative it is, and you haven't got the extremes on the other side, the more you'll probably get a positive result, because people tend to love these schemes. They just don't want to shout about it. So that's supporting individual schemes. And then I just want to talk a little bit about working with decision makers. Rosamond, can you start making throat cutting gestures when I've run out of time? Because I'm not looking at the time, I'm really sorry.
No, we're fine.
Okay, good. So I'm sure you know this, but in campaigning, political will is everything. It's absolutely everything. But also there is a kind of holy grail to aspire to, or holy trinity, I could say. You want the situation where you've got three things in place. You've got bold leaders with political will, you've got competent officers who know what they're doing, and then you've got at least some support from the public. And it's when those three things are in place that you can have positive change. I put this together, I don't know if I used the right words, but it's something that I heard Brian Deegan say when he was working for the Transport for London. It's just really stuck with me, that this is what we aspire to do. So, how can we get there? A really big part of it is building relationship. And that's, amazing things have come from campaigners going on a bike ride one-to-one with their cabinet members. And I can think of 3 separate London boroughs that has been the starting point of things turning around. And there's one ex-cabinet member who told us, she came and gave us a talk, and she said, the local campaigners just befriended me. She said, I used to drive everywhere, and they just befriended me. They took me on bike rides, they just talked to me. And she said they educated me, and that was the word she used. I just think that's so important, and they must have been doing it in a way that was respectful and wasn't patronising, or she wouldn't have taken it on board. And she really took it on board, and she really transformed the borough, where she was the cabinet lead for transport. So build relationship as far as possible, and then it's all about not being shouty, not throwing stones from the outside, but trying to get a seat at the table by being positive, being constructive. If public messaging especially, and if you've got something critical to say, try and do that behind closed doors. Try and earn that place where you can say it, because we're talking about human beings after all. That's what councillors are, and often they are in the job because they want to make a difference. And it's also important to build a relationship with officers. It's not just the political leaders. Sometimes officers can work to change the council leaders, the cabinet members' direction where necessary. And also stuff can just happen because a competent officer knows to do it and has been reminded to do it. It doesn't have to be a big political decision. So those, if you can have regular meetings with officers, we found that's really helpful. But it is also about holding the council to account, and that's why we like in London to do these. When election time comes up, we have asks, and we're doing that especially coming up in May next year, where all the London boroughs are going to be asking for climate asks. We're asking for climate safe streets, so 3 to 5 asks from each borough to do with low traffic neighbourhoods and protect cycle lanes, shared mobility, and so on. And then if you get your asks pledged to, and that party wins the election, then you hold them to account, you track their progress. There are some London boroughs who will put up a map of the cycle routes they were promised, and then they track that progress very publicly as the term continues. And then it can come to the point which I hope it never does, where you're really at loggerheads with your council. And you know, speaking of being constructive, it's just really sad to see what's happened in Kensington and Chelsea, where, you know, I know that the campaigners there worked so hard. They kept saying to the council, please can we sit down and talk, before they ripped out the bike lane, and they continue to say, we want to help, we're on your side, can we sit down and talk? And sadly, the council is choosing to spend tens and thousands of pounds fighting them legally in the courts, rather than sitting down and having that conversation. So, you know, you should never really have to get to that point if you consider to be positive and constructive, but sadly, maybe you will. But also, the thing to do is to remember to say thank you. And this is something we did at the end of the first bike lane was put in. It was a kind of opening ride. And we gave some flowers to our cabinet member. We said thank you. We made it about children, again, because it is about children. And we think it's really important to, you know, to show politicians that when they're brave, when they make brave decisions, they will be remembered and they will be thanked, and they are leaving a legacy. You know, we really want them to know that. And as London Cycling Campaign as well, we have campaigners awards every year. And this year we gave awards to I think 7 or 8 councillors to say, you know, you've been active travel champions in your boroughs, and we see, you know, what's been thrown at you and the fact that you've taken, and we really appreciate that. We want to recognise it, and you know, they've got an award they can hang up in their office. So, is it worth all the effort? This is my pins tweet. If you look at my Twitter, Fox Lane was our school run route for many years, but I never once saw a child cycle on this busy road, and only occasionally on the pavement. Now it's safe for anyone to ride their bike. I cannot tell you what the transformation this low traffic neighbourhood has been. It was more than 6,000, nearly 7,000 cars a day on this road, Fox Lane, that goes to the centre of the neighbourhood. There was always bits of car, you know, littering the roads after a Friday night. It was hostile, it was horrible. And now it's, you know, I'm always surprised when I go out and I see, you know, children cycling. I saw someone give a baccy to his friends over what used to be the busiest part of this road. I haven't seen a baccy in 40 years. You know, this for Enfield, this is a complete transformation. You know, sometimes I have tears in my eyes just seeing what goes on that street now. So is it worth all the effort? Yes, it is. And that's the end of my talk. And I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Claire, thanks so much. You began by saying that you had this sense that you were teaching us to suck eggs, but as Emma pointed out very quickly on Facebook, that's absolutely not the case. You know, whilst we've been campaigning here for 26 years, that's because there's a need for it, and we definitely don't have it all sussed here. And an enormous amount of what you've said has struck chords for me, and I'm sure for many of our viewers and listeners as well. I want to ask you a little bit more about what you describe as it being a conversation, because that seems to underpin a lot of what you've talked about this evening. Conversations with the people in your local community, the people where you're trying to implement a new scheme, you know, people working in politics in your area, and so on. And how did you get to those initial I think you described them as your 5 asks. How did you get there through conversation?
So I suppose the 5 asks were conversations with the local campaigners, and we had some help with that. There's a woman called Megan Sharkey, who now has moved to, where she moved back to Australia, I think. She was doing a PhD, and she came and she was a trustee at London Cycling Campaign, and she was really interested in how community groups could accelerate political change. And she came and worked with 3 groups, including the Enfield group. And she helped us to kind of crystallise what it was we wanted into these 5 asks. It was so helpful. So that was a process of, you know, we all sat around the table, we did a big brainstorming exercise, and that's what came out of it. But it's all of those things are so kind of universal, I think, to active travel campaigners, that a lot of groups have kind of taken very, very similar asks. And now we're doing asks for climate safe streets. Again, they're all quite similar to what we asked for in Enfield in the first place. one thing we could have done better and probably will do is make them a bit smarter, to say, you know, we want, say, 50% of the borough to be covered in low traffic neighbourhoods by 2026, or, you know, something like that that gives it more more definition.
Something that that would enable you to measure the progress.
Exactly.
With those things a little bit more. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, sounds great. And I think it's easy to sort of overlook the value of getting people from outside in to with a particular purpose like that, of helping you to shape some ideas.
She was great. Yeah, do look up Megan Sharkey. She's a real inspiration.
No, thanks for that, Anna. I hope you're taking notes out there. One of the things you also talked about a little bit, which is very close to us, again, you know, Cambridge has not got this sus, you know, we still find ourselves polarised at times. Sometimes as a campaign online, you know, as you describe, those sorts of things happen on Twitter and Facebook and so on, where people with differing views will be fairly vociferous about them. But also as individual cyclists too. And I was sort of struck looking at your Twitter page yesterday or today, where was it Simon Monk had responded to the accusation that cycle lanes were causing congestion and had led to London being the most congested city in the world. And he was really good at sort of facing down this by talking about facts and figures. But as you point out in your talk, you know, quite often that's not something that we have the opportunity to do. You know, either we're not well enough informed about a particular question that's arisen, or just in the moment it can feel a bit emotional. You know, I've seen you describe riding on hostile streets and how you can feel like you're not welcome there, and I think that's familiar to everybody here. And so what advice would you give to people about how to sort of hold yourself in that moment, and to, you know, do you have any advice about delivering something that will challenge but in a way that doesn't invite conflict?
Yeah, it's really difficult, and it depends who you're talking to. And I'm, you know, Simon, I take my hat off to him. He's my manager at London Cycling Campaign, but I would say this anyway. He does have a way of just having those facts and figures in the right place in his mind to present those. I'm not sure I could pull that off quite so well, but it is, you know, I kind of rely on having data, you know, in the right place on a particular website. The frequently asked questions thing is really useful to me. Especially on Twitter, where I can just link to something. But it does depend who you're talking to, and there are some people who it doesn't matter what evidence you give them, what facts and figures you come up with, you're not going to change their minds. And I think the thing to remember is you're not talking to them if it's a public forum. You're talking for the people who are listening, who are undecided. And all you can do is be very reasonable. Try and keep calm, and try and, you know, put those facts across, and be, you know, be generous, because sometimes people who come across, you know, you might feel attacked by, are simply misinformed or confused or upset. And we have to remember, I was talking to my plumber is incandescent with rage about London's roads at the moment, and he is a lovely guy, but what he sees is, you know, part of his road has been taken that he needs for his van, has been taken by a cycle lane, and he sees all of the traffic next to it, and he makes a very reasonable assumption that one has caused the other, and it hasn't. And I've given up trying to argue with him. I'm just like, I'm really sorry. And then if I can sneak it in, I'll say, you know, we want to see less traffic in London, so people like you who need to drive can drive. And if I can get the opportunity, I will say, you know, what we need, if you look at countries like the Netherlands, where, you know, driving is a dream, it's the top country in the world for driving, it's because there are so many alternative ways of getting around. So we need the cycle lanes to make the driving better. But usually I can't get that in talking to him, because he just needs to let off steam. So I'm very sympathetic to him.
So there's something about then in the moment having a sort of a go-to that means that you can deflect away from the personal, something online or you know, a place that you can direct people to. But also what you're describing is something about using those unpleasant feelings that we get if we feel accused, or, you know, if something feels a little bit personal, and finding a way of turning that into positive action. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also sharing your own story, because if you're having an argument, you're trying to come up with facts and figures, it can be quite confrontational. But if you say, you know, first of all, I'm sorry you got that fine driving through the camera at the end of my road, so I'm really sorry. But then say, do you know what? It was so dangerous. You know, I really feared for my children before they put in this LTN. You know, or you know, I'm just so chuffed that my daughter can now cycle to school because of that cycle lane. You know, just make it personal, make it real. Point out what the problem actually was, which was danger. Often it's danger, and we forget that that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about making people safer.
Yes, and highlighting that, finding opportunities to talk about how it is for more vulnerable people too.
Yeah.
We've got a question here from Anna, asking about you in your role with LCC, that's London Cycling Campaign for our viewers. What are your tips for working with local groups? You've talked a bit in your presentation about the idea of forming coalitions to strengthen campaigning work. What's the balance between them working on their own issues and collaborating together with a joint voice for campaigns like Climate Safe Streets?
Yeah, there isn't really an easy answer to this. I think so, especially in those boroughs where you've got a Better Streets group and a cycle campaign group, it can work really well. But then people might be drawn on you know, that time is always an issue, and we're talking about volunteers. So it tends to be sort of around a particular campaign. So at the moment with Climate Safe Streets, that's something that, for instance, Westminster Cycling Campaign, Westminster Healthy Streets are equally, you know, animated about and working on together, and that's quite nice and easy. Before that, Westminster Cycling Campaign were running, it's just coming to an end now, a campaign about consultations for some temporary bike lanes that are being consulted on to be made permanent. And Westminster Cycling Campaign actually took the lead in that. And Westminster Healthy Streets were just like, well, we'll back you up with some tweets. We'll try and get people to fill in the consultations as well. But it's not a sort of, you know, everyone has to come to joint monthly meetings, and that just gets overwhelming. It's kind of coalescing around a single issue, and the local election campaign is a really easy natural thing to do that on.
So something about if groups are working together regularly enough, then there are sufficient numbers of bridges between them to develop that sort of trust that actually one group can take a particular lead on an issue, and the other groups have some confidence that they will represent, you know, them fairly well enough. If every group doesn't have capacity to jointly lead on it.
Yeah. And Better Streets and Healthy Streets groups have to, you know, they have to be careful that they're not seen as just cyclists, because the whole point of their existence is they're talking for everyone. So, you know, if it's a cycle lane campaign, then it'll be again, it's just natural for the cycle campaigners to lead on that, and it's how much support publicly the Better Streets group comes in and gives to that.
There's one final thing that I wanted to ask you about, if it's okay, is that you describe in a couple of places your work with London Cycling Campaign, but also your work with, you know, in campaigning more generally as a sort of calling, that there are these sort of personal revelations that come out about your feelings. I don't want to quote you, but, you know, something about making a street better, making lives better, and it feeling like a calling. And I'm aware that for many campaigners, campaigning work can sort of have a habit of permeating life. How do you personally, because a lot of this is a personal story for you, how do you personally strike that balance?
Yeah, it's a great question. It especially now that it's my job. So before, I was working as a freelance editor, and I was doing cycle campaigning, Best Streets campaigning in my spare time, and now it is my job. So I've had to pull back from some things, and I've had to prioritize my kids. So where I was maybe doing stuff in the evenings before to do with campaigning, and it kind of, I have to set boundaries around that. And I've got this rule about no campaigning on a Sunday, which I frequently breach that rule. But yeah, the fact that it is a passion actually does mean that if I find myself tweeting about something that isn't directly my work, but it's something still street campaigning, it just comes naturally. It's not a chore really. Yeah, it's just making myself, if I feel myself getting stressed, then I'm just taking a step back and going, I can't solve everyone's problems, and then I'm going to play Candy Crush on my phone for an hour. And someone else
passing that on as advice, or just
yeah.
No, I hear what you're saying, that there's that there are opportunities to separate the work from things which you are aware that, were you not working within the campaigning arena, that you would be doing as voluntarily as just a local resident or whatever, and trying to see the separation between those two things so that they don't collide too much and take over.
Yeah, and just recognising we've all got limits, and if something doesn't happen because I didn't do it, then it's just not going to happen, and that's it's not the end of the world. But often if you drop doing something and someone else picks it up, and that was actually what needed to happen to release someone else to take that task.
That it'll matter significantly to someone somewhere.
Yeah.
We've got a new question come from Mark. Is there a political divide on LTNs in London, and does it split on party lines?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know how well qualified I am to answer. Not really, because, for instance, LTN, the Conservative central government is very pro LTN. It comes up in the gear change report, for instance. It came up in the way that they told councils to reallocate road space, and they specifically said modal filters are a way to do that. So this Conservative government is very supportive of LTNs, and yet we do see a lot of local Conservative local authorities who are very against LTNs. So, and then we see some that has tended to be the Labour, in my experience, the Labour councils who have tended to support it, but not all of them. And then Liberal Democrats seem to kind of fall either way. So it's very mixed. I hope that answers your question. And I think sometimes because LTNs have kind of got this reputation, sometimes it's better just not to call them LTNs. And you might have a council that would never consider an LTN and all the bad press that's gone with it, but would consider a traffic reduction scheme. So, that's what you call it.
Yeah, as a way around, so changing the nomenclature so that we avoid preconceived ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Because LTNs have now got a huge thing attached to it, because now everyone thinks they know what an LTN is, and there's so much hysteria in the press that you just talk about we want to make our roads safer, we want to reduce some traffic, we're going to get rid of the through traffic, and then it's a lot calmer.
Thank you. We've got another question come through from Hannah online, asking simply, in your ideal world, what would Enfield look like for people, and within that, cyclists?
Yeah, so we are on sign that people and cyclists are so I'm sure that's what's understood there. It would have so many fewer cars. Sorry, my grammar's terrible. It would just, it would be a place where you would not have to get into a car and it wouldn't occur to you to get into a car unless you were going on a longer journey or taking your grandmother to hospital or carrying very large objects. It just, you would have the choice. So you'd step outside and there wouldn't be 3 cars outside every house. I think you'd see streets that were much more about parklets and seating and children playing. It's very hard not to think of the Netherlands here, because you would get a playground on a street where every main road had a cycle track, and it had crossings, and town centres had car-free streets. It would just be, it would just be alive with people. And you would still be able to drive, but it wouldn't be most people's first choice for most journeys. And there would be children everywhere, and they wouldn't have their parents with them. You know, they would just be, and I saw this when I visited Cambridge, I saw these 2 young teenage girls on bikes, and I was like, oh, that's what I want. Because it was possible. And I saw that in the Netherlands as well, you know, kids going out on their own to enjoy themselves, and it was safe to do that. And that's the world I want to live in.
Oh, well, we would love to have you here in Cambridge at some point. So we'd really like to welcome you to come back and talk to us when we can do that in person, so that you can ride alongside some of those teenagers and
yes,
see how many backies you can spot.
Yes. That would be amazing.
Claire, thank you so much again for joining us for this evening's monthly meeting, the last of the year, and you really have given us, you know, a lot of food for thought. Please don't ever think that we've got anything sussed. You know, we've had some successes, and but we've still got a lot to learn too. And some of the work that you've done has been really, really inspirational. And I think will give people a lot of ideas as well about particularly about how we continue to support regional groups and work together with them, forming those coalitions as you describe them.
Brilliant.
Everybody online, we're going to move now toward, lots of people saying it was brilliant, thanks so much, this is great. You'll be able to have a look at the feed afterwards when this is available on the playback on Facebook and on YouTube, so enjoy those. For everybody else, I'm going to hand over to Anna now, who's going to give us our campaign roundup, and we're going to say goodbye, I think, to Claire. Thank you so much. She's going to go out and walk her dog in her low traffic neighbourhood. So thanks so much again. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks. So forgive me, I'm just going to change Anna's status so that she can start to share her screen with us. So she's going to rejoin us as a panelist, and that will mean that she can share some of the campaign updates with us all. So Anna, thank you.
Hello, everybody. Oh, that was brilliant. That was really inspiring. And also, one of my favourite streets in Cambridge for seeing people doing backies is down the riverside. And I've seen people with kind of skateboards on their back and musical instruments and just all sorts of like wonderful, all types of different people cycling, and I really love that sort of stretch along Riverside for that. Now I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that now? Great. So this is over to the sort of campaign roundup bit, and hopefully it's fairly short and sweet. We've had quite an intense week, as we'll come on to discuss. So I won't talk for ages, but do raise any questions that you have in the Facebook chat or on the Zoom chat, or tell me if I'm saying anything wrong and I've got confused after this busy week. So I will go on to my next slide. So this is what we were doing on Saturday. We had a Festive Lights ride. This was inspired by, a few years ago, we took part in the Illuminate Festival, and we really wanted to do something like that again and have a nice little low-key social before Christmas. So there were probably, I think, about 65 people came with us on Saturday. It was brilliant for such a new event. And we just did a little tour around Cambridge, see some of the Christmas lights in both residential areas and the city centre. And yeah, it was really good fun, really nice to see people. Lots of people decorated their bikes, there were lots of families. And so we really enjoyed that, and we are already sort of thinking that we might make that a regular part of the calendar and kind of planning what else we could do to sort of improve it for next year. So if you came on that ride, do let us know what you thought, what things we needed to change. We're thinking like maybe some of the bridges were a bit tight for the cargo bikes, so possibly a slightly different route. If you didn't come but you like the idea and you've got ideas about for next year, drop us a line as well. But that was yeah, really good fun, and thanks to everybody who came and to all the volunteers who organised it, and especially to Santa for leading us on that ride. Thank you, Santa, aka Alan, on this occasion. This has been the other great thing that we've had going on this week. So we've been raising money through the Big Give Christmas Challenge. We've been involved in this for several years, and this year is the biggest we've ever done. Our amazing donors, 82 people together, helped us raise £20,185, and I'm just so pleased about this. This is just amazing, and you are all so wonderful. Thank you. And this is to help us raise money for a new infrastructure campaigner to support local groups all around Cambridgeshire and help them kind of make their ideas for walking and cycling improvements and turn them into reality. We've already been working with lots of local groups this year. One example is Milton Cycling Campaign, who have installed over 200 cycle stands across the village. They've been campaigning various things about like the A10 and just responding to loads of consultations, signing the global COP26 climate letter. They're just done some really brilliant work. So it's just great to see that when we just give some of these groups our support, like just what they can achieve. And we really want to do that to more groups across the county. And then earlier in the month, or last month, we accepted a big cheque from the co-op because co-op members have been donating to Camcycle as they do their shopping through the co-op local community fund, and that raised £6,820, and that also is going towards our Zero Carbon Streets campaign supporting local groups across the region. So thank you to everybody that donated through the Big Give and everybody that donated through the co-op local community fund. This is a brilliant way to end our year, and watch this space because we will be advertising for this new role soon. So that is a really exciting thing to take us into next year. Talking of next year, we have our AGM coming up, and that's coming up very fast, it seems. January might seem like far away, but it's not that far. And we're delighted to have as a guest speaker Adam Tranter. And Adam, when we started advertising for this AGM, we were sort of saying some of the things that Adam does. He's behind the Bike is Best campaign. He's the CEO of Fusion Media. He's one of the presenters of the Streets Ahead podcast, and he was also the bicycle mayor of Coventry. But this week he's announced that he's giving up that role of bicycle mayor of Coventry, and that's because he has a very exciting new role as walking and cycling commissioner for the West Midlands, and so that's appointed by the mayor. So I mean, he's absolutely perfect for that role. That's really exciting to have such a strong advocate for active travel right in there, making a difference in the West Midlands, and we'll definitely be looking to them for inspiration, and hopefully getting some kind of similar active travel czar, our mayor has sort of said, in Cambridgeshire as well, to really sort of lead change in this region too. So yeah, that should be really great event. Come and listen to Adam, and also hear a bit about Camcycle's year, hear a bit about our plans for the future, and we'll be electing trustees for next year, and we'll also be celebrating some of our brilliant volunteers with our Camcycle Awards. So registration is essential for that. All are welcome. You don't have to be a member, although only members can vote. So if you go to camcycle.org.uk/AGM 2022, you can sign up there, book your place. And then also just to note the deadline for submission of motions, if there's any motions you'd like to raise at the AGM, or if you'd like to nominate yourself or somebody else for a trustee, that deadline is the 16th of December. You can find out more on the webpage. And just to say as well, we really welcome all types of trustees, anybody that would be interested in being trustees. We really want to kind of diversify our board and open ourselves to new perspectives, and really this is a really rewarding role. Please get in touch if you'd like to know more. We have also some co-opted positions through the year, and all our trustees are really friendly and welcoming. They'll really be happy to talk to you about what the role involves. There's training, there's support. You don't have to have any experience of being a trustee or working in a charity or anything at all. If you are passionate about active travel and the role it can play in making the places we live better, that's all you need to start your trustee journey with Camcycle. So do get in touch if you want to know more about being a trustee. So today, while we were finishing off our fundraising with the big give and having such an amazing result at the end. Robin, our chair of trustees, was also speaking on our behalf at the Highways Committee in Alconbury. That was the county council, and we raised loads of points. I haven't quite had time to kind of summarise it all and get to grips with what happened at that meeting, but it was very positive, lots of discussion on active travel. Robin came out saying he felt very positive. We were talking about Mill Road. We raised a question about the BP roundabout in Ely, which one of the local councillors said had been voted the most dangerous junction in Ely by local residents. We were also presented our petition for safe junctions, which we set up after the very tragic death of Anna Garrett-Quinton at the Addenbrooke's roundabout. So we asked some questions about that. And we also presented another petition about Windsor Road. We're very worried about a new design for the road space, which has been laid out here by the County Council, which would introduce lots more conflict points for cyclists and pedestrians, and we want to see that revised and really this route seen as what it is, which is a kind of key and long-standing kind of circular route, part of the sort of orbital cycle network in Cambridge. And so thank you so much to everybody who has jumped on that petition, signed it, written to the local councillor. We've really kind of raised awareness of that issue, and we'll be following up with that. And in fact, the chair of the Highways Committee has said he'd be keen to come and have a look at Windsor Road. And also the new head of highways has said that she'll come on a bike ride with us around Cambridge as well. So those are two things we'll be following up after the meeting. But yeah, just to say thank you so much for signing those petitions. It really does make a difference. And just because of the timing and how things have happened, just as I was listening to Claire there talking about LTNs, I was thinking actually there's been another highways meeting since our last monthly meeting, and that was a very positive meeting as well. And one of the things that came out of that was that all 6 of the kind of temporary modal filters that are put in Cambridge as part of the active travel scheme during the pandemic are approved to be made permanent now. And there's also one in Histon and one in Ely, two schemes that are being made permanent. So that is brilliant news. And thank you again to everybody who has supported this campaign. And what brilliant news for the people who are enjoying those routes, those nice, quiet walking and cycling routes, the residents that have been enjoying nice, quiet streets to live in. And let's do some more. And we'll be pushing on active travel scheme phase 2 in the future, but it's so brilliant that those ones have been made permanent. Right, this is the sort of next busyness for the next couple of weeks, just up to Christmas. We have lots of consultations happening, so many consultations, just to fit in amongst the kind of Christmas shopping and things. So the thing I would recommend most, if you go to camcycle.org.uk/consultations on our website, that links to all our blog posts about consultations. And there's one where we've got a summary of all of the ones at the moment. And there's a couple more to add to that, which are not on there. I think there's a Fenland cycling, walking and mobility consultation. And another one that I can't bring to mind right now. But 2 of the big ones at the moment, there's one on the local plan. And that's the deadline for that's the 13th of December, and we are busy working on our response to that. We'll get that up as soon as we can this week. And then there's also the GCP Making Connections consultation, which is also, you might have heard of the City Access project. So that's kind of looking at how can we reduce traffic, reduce congestion within the city, free up road space for active travel and public transport. And also as part of that, they're discussing some options for improved buses. So for example, more frequent buses, cheaper buses, more routes, things like that comes within that consultation. So we have put together a response guide on that already. And thanks very much to our traffic reduction subgroup that helped us with that. And you can see, yeah, you can find that on our, you go to camcycle.org.uk consultations, you'll find our response guide there. And these two links, these short links, are short links you can share to encourage more people to respond to those consultations. There's another GCP consultation on Eastern Access, which is the sort of Newmarket Road, looking at improvements for Newmarket Road, so that would be segregated cycle lanes along Newmarket Road. It would also be changing the very dangerous Newmarket Road Barnwell Road roundabout. That's reconfiguring that junction, and that's a really dangerous junction where people have been killed, so that's much needed. And also looking at the Newmarket Road Elizabeth Way roundabout, where currently there's an underpass, and looking at how that could be reconfigured. So yeah, do go and look at those and respond to those. Very exciting news for the end of the month. The Chisholm Trail is coming. It really is, and it seems to be on schedule to open this month. And I love this photo. Thanks, Simon, for this photo on Twitter. This is the new bridge over Coldham's Brook, and I just really like this way that it's kind of like this magical path into the distance. And hopefully we'll have some photos like that from the Abbey Chesterton Bridge soon as well, which looks like it's behind me. I need a more like wintry picture to bring that type. And so we have an idea that this is happening very soon. It should be happening soon, but we don't have an official day of when it's going to happen. But we would like to do a very low-key celebration, cheer, cycle over. So we will keep you updated. Keep an eye on our social media and on Cyclescape if you're a member, because we will let you know if something's happening. We will let you know. But yes, break out the bunting, the mince pies, the whatever you'd like to come and celebrate the Chisholm Trail with. Our winter magazine is out. Thank you to all our contributors. God, put my teeth in. Yeah, we've got some lovely picture on the front from when we visited Castle School, and there's an article in there about Castle School and how they've really embedded cycling into their curriculum. And we've also got articles on a whole range of things, the new Cyclops Junction at Histon Road, family cargo cycling, teaching kids to ride, loads and loads of stuff in there to keep you busy over the Christmas holidays. And just to say, the next magazine, I think the theme is something like staying active. If you've got any ideas or any ideas for the magazine over the next few months, if you have a burning desire to write for our magazine, take pictures, we really welcome that. So do get in touch. And yeah, and thank you also to all our advertisers who support us as well through the year, because that really makes the magazine happen. It's really valued support. Just to end with our resources, so don't forget our resources are all online. We've got guides to Welcome to Cycling, how to cycle safe and considerately. We've got a guide to looking after protecting your bike and reducing the risk of cycle theft. We've got lots of cycle theft news and some exciting announcements coming up soon, so yeah, watch this space. And then also a reminder that it's winter and you need lights, and this is our cycle lighting poster, and there's more information about the legal requirements at camcycle.org.uk/lights. So do make sure you are using your front and rear lights through the winter. And that's it. Thank you for joining us, everybody, and thanks to Rosie for leading a brilliant meeting, and to Claire for really inspiring us. I think that's given us lots of ideas to take us into the new year, as we continue to campaign for more low traffic neighbourhoods and better cycling streets in and around Cambridge. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna, and thank you all for joining us this evening. We wish you a lovely festive period, healthy and happy, and yeah, we look forward to being joined by many of you in the new year as well. So thanks again, and see you next time.
See you soon. Bye.